here. And Steve, I'm going to make you co-host. So if we need to, if dogs start barking, if you could mute folks, that'd be great. All right, thanks, Steve. Well, welcome to the what month? It's April, the April Lunch and Learn. We're excited to have you all for this program. We just about every year we've done a wrap up of papers that we've done at conferences. This year, the Society for Historical Archaeology that was at in New Orleans in January, and then the Mid-Atlantic Archaeology Conference that was held in Gettysburg in March. And so we're gonna have staff give summaries of their papers and 5-minute versions of them. And I've sent you all the full versions of the papers. Everybody, Caroline, Alicia, Alex, Liz, and myself sent out we get the full version on the Google Drive for you all to look at. But this 5-minute version is basically just to give you a thumbnail version of what the paper was about, and then hopefully entice you to go and look at the larger paper. So for the Zoom today, we're probably going to do about a half an hour of presentations with about everybody putting in about 5 to 6 minutes for each presentation, and then after that we'll open up the floor for questions, and then I'm going to give a update on where we're digging right now, and then an update on Calm and what's going on with archaeology. So without further ado, we will start with Caroline. Let me get your paper up here, Caroline. And yeah, you can come over here and you'll use my computer for this. So, and let me go ahead and share screens. And let's go to slideshow. So Caroline's paper is from the Mid-Atlantic Archaeology Conference, and it's entitled Fixer Upper: Mitigating the Historic Housing Crisis at Montpelier. So we'll get into the slideshow. And can everybody see the slideshow? Give a thumbs up if you can see it. I think everyone give a thumbs up. I think so.
Thumbs
Yeah,
up.
Chris is. Thanks, Chris. I'm gonna hide the meeting controls. So yeah, take it away, Caroline.
Hi, everyone. Sorry. Let me just get my script pulled up. I'm Caroline. I'm one of the interns here for the year-long internship, which is actually coming to a close on May 2nd, very sad. Today, we're going to explore what I've termed a historic housing crisis, which attempts to explain that a historic estate's period of interpretation doesn't necessarily exactly align with the full scope of an estate's occupational history, leaving us with this surplus of standing historical residential structures without connections to the Madison family. So what happens to these buildings, and why is it crucial to preserve them? I'll give a brief outline just to the relevant history, but if anyone's curious, I do have sort of a longer historical summary in the 20-minute script, which is available if you would like. So Montpelier itself, let's see. Yep. Montpelier sits in the Piedmont region of central Virginia and has been home to the indigenous Manahoac people, represented today by the Monacan Indian Nation, for over 2,000 years. No indigenous residential structures remain standing on the property, and it is a goal of the department to foster a deeper relationship with the first people to call this land home. The colonial history of Montpelier begins in around 1723, when Ambrose Madison directed enslaved laborers to clear land and build the first house on the property. Over the next few decades, the estate evolved significantly, and James Madison Sr., the president's father, oversaw the construction of a larger house called Montpelier, about half a mile away. By 1844, after President James Madison's death, Dolly Madison had sold the plantation and the enslaved population. By 1848, all of the homes of the enslaved community had either been demolished or were allowed to decay in place, and by 1850, the only remaining home on the landscape was the main house. We estimate that between 12 and 25 homes for the enslaved were lost during this period, representing the homes of over 300 enslaved people spanning 100 years of the plantation's history. My project specifically is guided by Bell Hooks's conceptual chapter, Home Place, a Site of Resistance, in her book, Yearning, Race, Gender, and Cultural Politics. Hooks in this book describes how the Black home place is a sanctuary, a place of resistance, and a center of memory. She argues that a home place is a testament to the people who make houses into homes, and that these identities of a home come from that domestic and emotional labor, specifically done by Black women to provide that sanctuary for their families. This concept is crucial to understanding the historic and reconstructed residential buildings at Montpelier, many of which were home to enslaved families and their descendants. Using the GIS data compiled by Matt Reeves, I identified 31 still standing residential buildings and created a typology of their current use, interpreted space, unused and monitored structures, and adaptive reuse. The interpreted spaces category includes buildings that have been restored or reconstructed to reflect a particular historical period. These structures, like the main house, the South Yard quarters for the enslaved, and the Gilmore cabin, offer immersive experiences for visitors. One aspect of Montpelier's interpretation is the involvement of Joe McGill, founder of the Slave Dwelling Project. Joe's led many groups of participants, including descendants, archaeologists, and expeditioners, to stay overnight in some of these reconstructed and preserved homes, bringing them to life in a tangible and very powerful way. I believe that these homes are therefore much more than these museum pieces. They are repositories of that lived experience and memory and survival. The second type that I developed was the unused and monitored category, which includes 10 structures that are not open to the public. These buildings range in condition from relatively well-preserved to rapidly deteriorating, and many are not currently in use because of the cost of upkeep. One notable example is the Page House, which once belonged to Lillian Page, the personal cook of the last private owner of Montpelier, Marion DuPont Scott. The granddaughter of Lillian Page, who is in this picture, she's on the very left, Jane Shelton, is a member of the MDC and a vital department volunteer and has vivid memories of the house. She speaks of her hope to see it lived in again, emphasizing how without people, the house dies. This sentiment is echoed across many unused homes on the property. Without active use, they risk becoming forgotten. The enslaved quarters at Arlington House is the last standing original domestic structure for enslaved people at Montpelier and is one of the most regularly monitored due to its fragility, historical importance, and close proximity to intern housing. Limited archaeological investigations have revealed fragments of wallpaper and other clues about the lives of people who lived here, helping us to piece together the history of those who were once enslaved on the Newman plantation. The implications of the decorative choices associated with wallpaper and the use of newspaper as a reinforcing material supports the identity of this structure as a home and as a place of transformational sanctuary that Hooks outlines as the home place. Finally, we have the adaptive reuse category. This involves repurposing historic buildings for new functions while preserving as much of their original architectural integrity as possible. At Montpelier, this is a critical tool for managing the financial and functional demands of the estate while also ensuring that history is preserved in a meaningful way. Arlington House, where I currently live and where many of you have stayed, has been repurposed several times over the years. Built originally in 1848 by enslaved laborers belonging to Thomas Newman, Arlington House has a complex history of adaptive reuse. After being purchased by the DuPont family in 1902, the house was remodeled, and following World War I, the house was repurposed again as a hospital for soldiers suffering from shell shock. Currently, Arlington House serves as a residence for interns during our tenure at Montpelier and as housing for expeditioners and the annual field school. The house is actually scheduled to have an expedition in September that focuses on masonry repairs on the chimney. And I believe that by classifying these buildings into categories, we can examine how their evolving use continues to reflect the multifaceted identities of those who have lived in, worked in, and shaped these spaces to become homes. This examination of residential structures at Montpelier emphasizes the importance of maintaining these spaces as repositories of memory and significance. They are homes, places of resistance, survival, and revolutionary love. By preserving them however we can, we honor the people of the past and support these places in order to teach and reflect on the complexities of our shared American history. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. That was wonderful. And up next, we have Alicia and her paper, which is entitled, you get to Alicia's paper here, Seeking a Gendered History at a Freedman's Farm, a Black Feminist Approach. And I'm going to go back and share screens here with you all. And all right, thank you, Alicia. Go ahead and take it away. Let me hide the meeting, hide floating controls. All right, I think they're gone away. If they pop down, I'll help you.
Okay. Hello, my name is Alicia. I am another one of the archaeology interns. So, the Gilmore Farm is a post-emancipation home site located in Orange County, Virginia, and a National Trust for the Historic Preservation Site co-stewarded by the Montpelier Foundation and the Montpelier Descendants Committee. While excavations on the site were conducted over 20 years ago, there is still a lot more to be learned about the Gilmore family who lived through the transition from enslavement to landowning. A 2020 master's thesis by Heather Lash, former Montpelier archaeology intern, analyzed the faunal record of the Gilmore cabin. Building on the work of Lash, this paper aims to apply a Black feminist lens to the zooarchaeological record to attempt to understand aspects of gender in everyday life for the Gilmores. From oral histories, it is understood that George Gilmore was enslaved at Montpelier under the period of James Madison's ownership. From 1870 until he died in 1905, he and his family lived on the land known as the Gilmore Farm. In 1900, he and his wife Polly purchased the land, and after his death, his family continued to live there until a legal battle in 1920 resulted in the land being bought by William DuPont Sr. There is more to the story of the Gilmore family and their descendants, but I can't get into it today for the sake of time, but please see my full paper for more. From the previous excavations, artifacts related to sewing and dressmaking, such as needles, pins, and beads, recovered, confirmed the oral history that existed in the Gilmore family that the women of the family regularly sewed. Also, through excavations, the lives of children were revealed through the presence of toys, such as these Noah Ark figurines that were whittled out of wood. The exterior of the cabin was also excavated and provided evidence for gardens, animal pens, location of an earlier layout, and footprint of another structure no longer standing. In 2020, Heather Lash's master's research analyzed the faunal remains from the Gilmore Farm and compared them to the faunal remains from the field quarter at Montpelier to compare pre- and post-emancipation foodways. The field quarters served as the homes for the enslaved agricultural laborers, and Lash found that the Gilmore assemblage contains more wild animals than the field quarter assemblage. Lash's analysis found that at the Gilmore Farm, the dominating species using minimum number of individuals, or MNI, was rabbit and chicken. While rabbits were likely wild caught, chicken is indicative of a domestic species that could have been raised on the farm. Wild game from the Gilmore Farm includes high quantities of woodchuck, eastern gray squirrel, and rodents and birds. In this paper, I attempt to apply a Black feminist approach to the zooarchaeological or faunal data set to consider the role of food in terms of culture and identity. For me, it's important to take this approach as we know Black women were present at Gilmore and my role as a Black feminist. To do this, I first began by asking questions about the Gilmore Farm with the knowledge of the analyzed faunal data set and previous knowledge of Gilmore. Are we able to learn anything about gender roles, differences in what was eaten by who may have prepared what? Questions that, spoiler alert, I still don't have clear answers to. Again, from previous excavations, we know that the areas within the cabin centered around the hearth were potentially used for sewing activities, but the hearth is also an area of cooking. Another way that the faunal data set could be analyzed to get at other information is through rethinking animal and human relationships rather than just utilitarian. This brings in another theoretical framework of decolonizing zooarchaeology, which includes re-examining human-animal relationships from an indigenous perspective. Naomi Sykes writes about another way of thinking of the animal-human relationships by looking at understanding the human response to wild. Here's a quote from her. Human response to wild animals reflect individual social and cultural attitudes to the natural world. Map how humans perceived their place in the cosmic order. And this is important to understand when considering the large amount of wild species found at Gilmore Cabin. The most notable bone modification noted by Lash were the punctured rabbit. Lash speculates that this may have been done either by hunting, through the use of a gun, or trapping. At this time, it's not known which was actually done. And this also brings to mind the dichotomy of hunter and gatherer that is brought up by Sykes. She speaks about the potential of children and women participating in trapping as well. Overall, I found it difficult to use just the zooarchaeological record alone. In an ideal study, the entire assemblage excavated from Gilmore would have been able to be used in this paper. However, in the current state, the data is unusable. The artifacts are in need of recataloguing, especially those relating to cooking and eating would be interesting to look at to better understand. However, there's a wealth of knowledge within cookbooks, notably those of Edna Lewis, who was from Freetown, and a freedman settlement in Orange County, Virginia. Looking towards local foodways and traditions is another way to understand how food has been used to express cultural and gender ideologies. In the nearby town of Gordonsville, Black women were known to sell chicken to train passengers. And through looking at these practices, we can argue that the sale of chicken to travelers may have begun as a practice performed by Black women. This would make sense considering that chicken makes up 7.6% of all species identified at Gilmore. However, Lashes argues that the chicken may have been raised for their eggs. Overall, we can see glimpses into a gendered history of foodways through the zooarchaeological evidence, oral history, and contemporary cookbooks. It remains difficult to apply a Black feminist lens to the Gilmore Farm Zooarchaeological Assemblage. To better approach this, I wish to analyze and recatalog the assemblage that was excavated from Gilmore, especially those related to cooking and eating, and also look at botanical samples that could be helped to understand and get a more robust view of foodways. Thank you.
Thank you, Alicia. That was great. And next up, we have Liz, whose paper is focused on our recovery efforts at the lab, and bringing hers up. Liz, you want to log in here? We just have one
Sorry,
minor
everyone.
technicality. And I won't look at your login, Liz.
Fine. There we
Nice. And I'll
Okay.
share screens again. Go back over here, share screens. And then slideshow. And boom, there you go.
All right.
Thanks, Liz. And Liz, you get your title.
go. Yep.
Yeah.
Hi, everybody. So my paper was titled Grace Under Fire, Electrical Fire at the Montpelier Archaeology Lab. To be honest, the events of the fire are probably not a shock anymore to anyone because most of our audience here today has been with us through the last year of the fire recovery efforts. And this paper was really presented at the Society for Historical Archaeology conference in New Orleans in January. And this was really an opportunity to share the news of the April 8th fire and its aftermath with the wider archaeological community. So basically, I went through the events of the fire. So as many of you know, the electrical fire at the archaeology lab and offices broke out around 5 p.m. on April 8th, 2024, and it was quickly responded to by the local Orange County firefighters from all over the county. Firefighters stayed late to extinguish the fire and helped Matt pull out almost all the boxes of artifacts and paperwork from the building. In the paper, I go through images of the night of the fire and its aftermath. I go through the different spaces that were affected, mostly the office space where Matt, Steve, and Chris' office was, the library space where we lost the vast majority of, if not all, of the books in the library that housed over 1,000 books and academic journals and research materials that we had accumulated over the years. Then I go through the lab and point out some areas that were most impacted, mostly near that door that many of you entered as you're coming up from the parking lot. That's where I got hit the hardest. And the desk I used to sit at got hit pretty hard. We have a before and after of what the lab looked like, which I think is pretty shocking to see. That picture on the left was taken in our lab program just a couple weeks before the fire, and then the aftermath of the fire on the right. In terms of the impact on artifacts, we were fortunate that the affected collections were ceramics, which overall held up in the fire. However, the biggest problem was plastic bags that they were housed in melted to the artifacts. And we are so incredibly fortunate that we have the support of the Maryland Archaeology and Conservation Lab, where conservator Ariana Johnston has been painstakingly removing plastic melt from over 8 boxes of impacted ceramics. And she essentially has a heated tool that is made to heat up to the melting point of the plastic and slowly peels away layers of plastic from these impacted ceramics. And she's recovered thousands of artifacts so far, and we're really lucky to report that most of the labels on the ceramics have survived. So we still have contextual information for the vast majority of the ceramics that were impacted by the fire. We've had just so much community outreach and support through the last year, and there's not enough time to get into each person individually, but in the paper I get into this a little more. But there were just so many people who helped us, and I also want to thank the crew that worked so hard to move the impacted collections, donning Tyvek suits and respirators for weeks and weeks and weeks and months, and just worked so hard to get us out of this terrible situation. We've learned a lot in the last year, and just some highlights here, and doesn't cover everything we've learned, obviously, but basically disaster mitigation is a marathon and not a sprint. We reached out to the National Heritage Responders Network, and they really helped us get in touch with folks who could help us over the course of the months that followed. We found that scanning and digitizing of paper records was absolutely crucial. And if you can't do it right away, then metal filing cabinets were the best preservation that we found of the paperwork that we had. We need, more fire safety and management plans and being on top of fire suppression systems and smoke detectors and things like that. Maintaining storage logs ruthlessly is super crucial for understanding where your collection is at all times. And artifact fine arts insurance was absolutely critical for us to be able to get support after the fire. And last, just a pitch to everyone on the call, our community is what got us through the worst of our disaster, and we would not be anywhere without all of you. And so moving forward, we are moved into the Montpelier Supply Store, and the renovations are just amazing. And you can see the shelves behind me, that we're just so happy to be in this new space and really looking forward to welcoming you all to the new Community Archaeology Lab at Montpelier. So can't wait to see you guys all so soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. Nice. And one thing I would revise on that is that last week we had an expedition, and there was a fire investigator Michael Nelson, and what he said about the metal filing cabinets is he said if the fire had been sustained longer, like without the Orange County crew coming in, that basically everything in the metal filing cabinets would have burnt up as well. It's just that for a short, intense period, they protected it better than the plastic, but no substitute for scanning all your paper files. So, next I'm going to present my paper, and if one of you all could give me a 1 minute warning, that'd be great. So I will be willing to be yanked off the stage as well if I go too long. And let me get to the PowerPoint here. And now go back to, oh boy, this is being funny. Let's see. Yeah, I'm trying to go into share screens here. Share. And then all right. I think everybody can see the presentation here. The title of my paper was, this is for the Society for Historical Archaeology Conference, was Community as Client, a descendant-based archaeological research approach to a presidential plantation site. And to almost an exclusive extent, the paper that I delivered was informed by Dr. Michael Blakey and his team's clientage model, which has very, a carefully defined role between the archaeological research and descendant community for the sites for which folks are excavating. And in this case, we've been working with the Montpelier Descendants Committee for since their existence in 2020, and before that for over 20 years. And one of the the defining questions that has come up is, giving equal priority to all groups at this site. Given that it's a presidential site, there's obviously going to be an emphasis on James Madison, the president. But when you look at who is living at the site and who is doing the work on the site, the vast majority of the individuals were enslaved individuals. And in discussions that we've had with members of the Montpelier Descendant Committee, one thing that's come up, it came up very early in our discussions, is how we can see the intellectual contributions of their ancestors through the archaeology. And so in this paper, what I wanted to do is, revisit where we've been with this process. And one of the areas that, typically is viewed as the intellectual property of the enslaver, the landowner, is the formal landscape around the house. And in this case, we've done archaeology for years, looking at the main house and the Euclidean geometry there. And what comes up is, doing basically, it's seen as an autobiography of James Madison. And so when you start looking at the documentary record for this, there's, what's exclusively presented is the owner's perspective on this. But in doing the archaeology, what we started to discover is that the enslaved were making contributions that were absolutely critical, not just to having this landscape be successful in the construction, but also in the layout. So, for example, a very rudimentary example is the post holes we discovered in the front yard. We found evidence of charred posts that allowed the fence posts to be preserved in the ground for many years beyond if they had just been buried directly. And what comes from this is, it's a local knowledge of how wood interacts with the soils. And this is something that the enslaved would have had a much better knowledge base on than, say, Mr. Madison. And second, if the charring post was something that was was one that was directed by the enslaver, by Madison, it would more than likely have been written about between letters between he and Jefferson, where they're even detailing what size gravel to use on the front walk. No mention of this. So what it comes clear is that the source of this information is in enslaved landscapers. Another place is even the location of buildings on the landscape. So kind of the cornerstone of this landscape is the temple, the Garden Temple that was built in 1811, and it's above a massive 25-foot deep ice house. And what we've discovered in looking at this ice house is it has it's always dry, and where this the drainage comes from is likely a set of underground deposits of slag that are from an 18th century blacksmith shop. And so this French drain as sorts determine where this temple could successfully be placed in the landscape. And so this basically undergirds the entire layout of the grounds. And then other things, when you look at the fills of on the landscape. Oh, thank you, Chris. Thanks, Liz. What becomes clear is, like the terracing of the garden, that was done by folks who knew how soils responded to the hydrology, how soil structure worked. And so the garden with its terracing is a really amazing example of this, with terraces being there for over 200 years. And then on the larger landscape, what we found evidence for in the East Woods is in the early 19th century, the main successful crop that's being grown is tobacco. And with the erosion that occurred in the East Woods and across the property, the only place these crops could be grown is in the bottomlands. And these bottomlands today are even today well drained. And the evidence for this comes from these set of redirected streams that are channelized that provides drainage. And so the folks that would have had expertise on this would have been the enslaved. They would have known the hydrology and how this watershed would have worked. And so with all this, it begins to really we start to ask a different set of questions when we make the story much more inclusive of all the folks that were on the landscape. And so welcome your all's input on this, and look forward to talking with you all about this more. And next up, we have Alex Michnik, who is going to be talking about our current excavations. And his paper is entitled, let's see, Alex here. Yeah, A Pleasant Walk from the Madison's Home, Preliminary Survey of Two Enslaved Households at Walnut Hollow. And let me share screens here. Oh, it is still on the second screen. This is stop share. PowerPoint can be a real bear. I'm going to close this out. Yeah. From now on, I will be using slides. That's thank you, Liz. All right, there you go, Alex. And we'll take my little fumbling around for account of how much time you had. So.
Cool. All right. So thanks, Matt. So today we're going to be talking a little bit about the preliminary report that we've done over the phase 1 investigation of Walnut Hollow. And we're going to touch a little bit on a couple other things that were already discussed in terms of landscape usage and so on and so forth. But to give you a little bit of context, in 2021, up through early 2023, we began a metal detector survey over this area on the far left of your screen, kind of in that rectangular dotted line box just north of the temple. And what we found might have been what we think are evidence of at least 2 domestic structures dating to the late 18th and early 19th centuries. And so on the top of your screen right there, you've got some pretty heavy concentration areas of metal artifacts. A lot of those are actually nails too. And we've got a mixture of wrought and cut nails there. And then in the bottom portion of your screen, and I think you're going to talk a little bit about this later, Matt, is the late 18th, early 19th century blacksmith shop. In this particular area that we're highlighting up here, not only did we find a ton of metal artifacts in the metal, iron, and copper alloy artifacts in the metal detection survey rather, but also to a number of other items like ceramics, window glass, things that are associated with domestic structures as well. But our research questions going into this particular project are where are the actual structures located? When do they date to? Who lived there? The occupation period of these structures. And we also want to know what the intersection, if any, is there between these structures and the enslaved who were laboring at the blacksmith and ironworks complex. And as you can see, this particular area to the immediate south of where we are currently looking at Walnut Hollow, you've got the temple and also the Pine Alley. And we want to know to what degree might these structures have postdated the construction of the temple and this transformation of the landscape, moving away from the blacksmiths and ironworks complex that was there at least through the early portion of the 19th century. And, after it was moved basically to the home farm area. And to do that, we've done a number of different things, investigating where these structures are and just the general shape of things on the landscape itself. So on February 8th, former Field Director Terry Brock came out with Sarah Lowry from New South Associates, and they brought out some ground penetrating radar equipment as well as some magnetometry. And we identified what might have been a possible duplex structure that was in line actually with at least 4 or 5 different piers that were visible on the surface. And we're going to be placing some units over those hopefully in the upcoming season. Just taking another look at how those things align and what sorts of material culture might be found in the vicinity there. Also looking for subterranean structural features and whatnot. And those results are pretty interesting. So we're going to be taking a pretty close look at that as well. Additionally, in terms of material culture, we found a number of different things, like I mentioned, some ceramics. So on the top left up there, you got some nails down on the bottom left. So we're finding a number of different things that are associated with households. Additionally, to the metal detector survey, like I mentioned, that's ongoing actually. We're finding a number of different things there as well. So horseshoes are really cool. Chain links as well. Just lots of different iron artifacts as well. So some more ceramics I've thrown in here. And for a total count of like what we found during shovel test pit surveys, so far we've dug well over 90 of those. We've got quite a bit more to do. But yeah, got you. Thanks. Yeah, but this will just give you a general overview of what we found so far. But season's still pretty early, but the goals for this season and possibly next season during our phase 2 investigation is we want to understand a little bit more about the enslaved households that were here. We also want to clarify how these households fit into our understanding of landscape changes in Montpelier between the 18th and 19th centuries. And lastly, we really want to understand the connection with the nearby industrial context and if they persisted, if these homes persisted on the landscape through the large scale changes and how these changes affected the daily lives of those living within the performative landscape of the temple, the Pine Alley, and the North Yard. And for that, I'm going to turn it back over to you and you talk a little bit more.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Alex. Good job. All right. Well, I'll briefly touch on our excavations this season. This season, we're going to be looking at the area of Walnut Hollow that Alex was just talking about. And on the map here, the site we're going to be excavating is this one home for enslaved family that's on the edge of the slope right here that we've done shovel test pits and metal detector survey on. We'll be doing excavations in this area through about late August, early September. And then starting in September, we're going to start looking at the area of the blacksmith shop. And if you've been to Montpelier recently, you'll see that Dennis has been living in a sea of red flags. And basically, the concentrations in this area are just insane. He's got about at least a half an acre of artifact concentrations immediately adjacent to the temple, between the temple and where the path goes down to the ice pond, which is also marked by the 3 horse graves from the DuPont period. And this blacksmith shop was in existence from at least the 1750s until the 18 teens. And based on both documentary evidence, it was run by the head blacksmith, Moses, but was a center of just massive production, not just doing repairs for plantations, repairing tools, but there's one visitor that talks about an entire wagon being built when he was here for 3 days. So they're really excited to reveal this part of Montpelier's history with the expedition programs. And before getting into all that, what I thought I'd do is open up the floor for any questions that people might have, and go into the chat and see if anyone has any questions. And if not, I was gonna fill the rest of the time talking about the season, and then also what we've got with where we're at with the new lab building, and show you some slides of that. And Sakina, how are you? Good to see you.
I'm fine. I just wanted to thank you so much for all of the informative lunch and learns and presentations. They are so well appreciated.
Oh, thank you, Sakina, and also appreciate you for all the help you give, especially editing some of the mail newsletters I send out at like 6 a.m. on Saturday. So
That's when I'm up.
yeah, we're both
No
up
problem.
then. So
Thank
thank
you
you,
so
Sakina.
much.
And Carolyn will be back in 1 second. I see there was a question from Denise, but Susan had a question. Is there any relationship between the new sites and Dolly's Midden? That's the dining room midden. And I could go ahead and handle that one. That the relationship between those sites is they're actually the only intersection we have of those 2 sites is the downslope deposits from the blacksmith shop do intersect with the downslope, which are 18th century, do intersect with the downslope deposits of the dining room midden from the retirement years. And show this. I could do it really quickly on the map here. Dolly's, the dining room midden is in this bottom, right in this area. And then the blacksmith shop was in this area. So both are, both those deposits go into this gully leading down to the ice pond. So that's the main connection. And let's see. And then for Denise has a question for Carolyn, and I'll probably just answer that. Denise says, in the MAC presentation, you mentioned that houses 7 and 11 are not DuPont in their dates and date to the late 1800s. What evidence has been found for their age? Was their age known when they were adapted for reuse? Yes, 7, that one, 7 and houses 11 and houses 7 are dated to pre-1900 based on two things. One, there's a 1903 map that shows them being present when the other ones are not. But then there's also an 1880 insurance policy that was taken out by the owners Dietrich and Bradley, and they have those houses there. And then there's also just the nail evidence that in House 11 especially, that one dates potentially to the mid 19th century. House 11 is the big house that's up that's yellow, that's up on the hill, and then House 7 is the one that's all the way on the far right. So yeah, does anyone else have any questions about the presentations?
I have one question.
Yeah.
I
Go
wanted
ahead,
to know,
Sakina.
are there any similarities between Thomas Jefferson's ice house and James Madison's ice house?
Yeah, Thomas Jefferson's ice house is in the basically that kind of that wing of offices that's in the pavilions that run under the building. The one similarity that is not a similarity is Jefferson writes that in the early 19th century, he assigns an enslaved individual to bail out the ice house. So he has all kinds of water problems that that Madison never had at the ice house under the temple. And Chris, would you add any more to that? Because you were your whole thesis and all that.
Yeah, what I would add is it kind of builds on the point in your paper, Matt, was all of the knowledge of how to manage the water, the ice melts, the water, which you want to maintain so it doesn't cause exponential melting of what ice is in the ice house. That knowledge rested with the enslaved. They used the landscape, the soil characteristics in order to control water flow, including its placement right at the edge of the top of a ravine. So that was all intentionally done. So just expertise.
Cool. And it looks like Denise has a question for Alex. And I know the exact answer for this if you don't necessarily know it.
Yep.
For in your MAC presentation, you discussed Granny Millie and the history of ornamental garden hermits in Europe. Is there any record for them existing in the U.S.?
I think Chris might have a little more information on this too, but when we were looking into this possible theory for the paper, that the garden hermit trend is seen largely among European aristocracy. And for the Virginia planners that were here, it's not given necessarily that they were doing some of the same things, but one of our hypotheses is that they were actually also taking part of this practice.
Okay. Yeah, the hermit, there was Dallin Brown writes about this with some of the like the grottos in Europe, where there would be a older individual that would be hired to basically be discovered by elite visitors. And yeah, that with some of the writings that are discussing visiting the enslaved community, where it comes from, that kind of tradition is hard to say, but it would have been familiar. And probably yell, Alex. So.
And just to follow up with that too, as the landscape is kind of transformed into the temple and ice house, and as well as the pine alley, as it moves away from the focus upon industrial use of the landscape, and if these houses did persist, it might fall in line with their ornamental or performative usage, to have a potential, garden hermit trend, if you will. Yeah.
Yeah, an expectation on the enslaved that they would interact in some way with visitors, and yeah, that's part of this forced landscape. Hey, Carolyn, how are you? I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, it was still a shock to see the pictures of the fire because I was there at the time, and saw it the day after, and I was there in the lab just a short while before it happened, not knowing it was going to happen. But are you planning on restoring the small house next to the Arlington house that was, you say, occupied by an enslaved family? And are there other buildings on the property that were occupied by enslaved people that are going to be restored?
Yeah, Carolyn's running around here to answer that, and I can. Yeah.
Yeah. Hi. As of right now, there are no sort of extensive plans to restore the enslaved quarters at Arlington. It is sort of a medium priority goal for the department. I think the building itself has a lot of emotional meaning. It's also super visible to people when you come and stay at Arlington House. In 2017, I believe there was a grant given to stabilize the structure. The structure also used to have a porch on one side, but it became so sort of deteriorated that it threatened the integrity of the rest of the building. So the house is being maintained as well as it can be right now, but for the future, I think it's going to, maybe be a priority later on.
And it really comes in like restoration without having a well-developed use plan can be really problematic. Because say if we just on our own decided without any context to restore the building back to the period of how it appeared during enslavement, and then removed, say, the 1870 portion, or even inside removed the wallpaper from the 1930s. And then in developing a research plan for this, later on, if we discovered there was a whole set of oral history about the interior use of the building in the 1930s with, families with memories, we would restore it in a very different way. So, the Gilmore cabin is an example of that. The Gilmore cabin originally had a 19 teens edition on it, and that had collapsed. And when we did the restoration, we consulted with the family and with the Carter Woodson Institute. And what the family came back and said is, restoring it to the period of the immediate post-emancipation era was an era that they had very little family history on. And the period that was later dating was also a very painful period for them with the loss of the land. And so based on the family's input, the preservation that was present, we decided to restore it to its 1880s. And that allowed us to do, in some ways, no harm to the building, but then also honor the traditions and the wishes of the family. So yeah, restoration gets complicated. It's just like reconstruction as well. What part of the landscape do you reconstruct and what time period do you pick? So, but yeah, and so for this season, I really briefly, I think some of you all had asked me about some, how our funding was doing with the cuts in federal funding, and to let you all know, it's been pretty dramatic. We've lost about a third of our funding for next year from federal grants that we either had or anticipated on getting, and so this makes coming out on programs even more important. So that you all attending programs is such a huge boon to us, first of all, because we love seeing you all and you all are friends, and the fees you all provide as part of coming on a program is just a huge part of our ability to keep going as a department and as an institution. So thank you all for that. And for this year, we've got we've been working on developing a whole new set of programs. There's programs, we have for the week-long programs, those are chiefly full excavation weeks, and at the last 2 days of the programs, we're offering a number of different new sets of tours and activities. So, for example, in the fall, we're going to be doing with the excavations at the 18th century blacksmith shop. So that program in late September, we're working with a local individual in Goochland County who has about 5 generations of blacksmithing in his family going back to the period of enslavement. He's going to be coming out and doing blacksmithing demonstrations. And actually, next month in May, Jeffrey Mabry is going to be doing a lunch and learn with us. He's going to be on site. Steve was just down there yesterday and tested out the Wi-Fi connections, and it seemed to work out. So we'll be able to do it live from his shop in May. And then also doing next week, I'm looking at Peggy, you're on the screen. We're having the cooking program that we're doing next week, and really excited to have Jerome back. And that one filled up so quickly that we're offering another cooking program. Jerome said he could come back in early October. So that first week in October, we're doing a week-long excavation combined with 2 days of cooking. And one of our regular expeditioners is also having a family reunion that week. So they'll be taking part in the dinner on Thursday night for that. So lots of exciting things happening with that. And one other thing that's going on is with the renovations to the building here on May 9th, we're going to have an open house and would welcome you all to come to that. If you're in the area, with so many of you all living across the country, we're also doing it as a virtual event. So you can register for that at noon on May 9th, that Friday, and take part in everything that's going on. And for many of you all have given donations to this building and really appreciate it. We're continuing to look for those donations. We're going to be using those this year to not only finish the stabilizing and the renovations to the structure, but then also use those donations for setting up the study collections and the some of the exhibits here in the lab. So really excited about where we're at with that. And I can let me share screens again, and I can I've got some shots of the where we're at with some of these the renovations. One of the things that we've been working on is not only the lab space that is the main part of the building and what it's best known for. And on May 9th, one of the things we're going to feature for the May 9th program is that week we're working with the MDC. MDC is an oral history committee, and we're organizing with the MDC interviews with local community members who have memories of the store. So with the store as the context, we'll be interviewing folks, on site, in place, all the power of place that we always talk about. And there's many people that, not only have memories, but also have items they've said they could bring back that they had purchased at the store, which is just really exciting to really give some context to Calm. And one of the areas that we also have is we're going to have a new conservation lab that we're going to be setting up. What you see here, it looks like a kitchen. One of the things that Liz requested, which I thought was ingenious, was a pot filler. And no, that's not for making pasta. That's going to be for the electrolytic reduction tanks. And this has turned out to be really critical because almost all of the iron that was conserved over years past that was in the old lab was heat altered, and that's caused it to spall. So we're seeking money from the insurance company, which hopefully they'll agree to reconserve a lot of these items. And so we'll be doing that over the next year as well. But this space will be, also where we do both, source of water, but in the wintertime doing flotation. In the basement, we've got an amazing, large area open area in the basement for storage, but also that's where we're going to have our photo station. So I know Liz talked about in the lab for years, if somebody was walking around in the lab when photos were being taken, the whole building would shake because it was a trailer, but in the basement, it's all a concrete floor. And so that was the photographers requested that space because it's not going to move with any kind of movement, even with maybe when the trains go by, it might move a little. But this space is just going to be amazing for setting up shelves. All the equipment you see right there is the work, the contractors' materials they've got in place, but all that's going to be gone. And one of the other things that we've been doing is UVA has been incredibly generous with donating all kinds of shelves and desks. So here's a picture of our archaeology truck at Clark Hall picking up some of these shelves that go into the community archaeology library, which is the other column here. And the completed library, what we did is we took these shelves, cut them in half, and put them against the wall. We didn't want to have them this is upstairs, in the upstairs space of Calm where we have the offices. And this is going to be the new staff library. And we've been really fortunate that a lot of colleagues, a lot of you all have donated archaeology texts, especially historical archaeology texts. And we're beginning to build our old library back. So what we've done is for the books that have been donated, a lot of folks have added notes to the book. So we include these notes in the book, and then we have a donation page of where they come from. And in many of the cases, this is, what we're calling the Library of the Stars. Some of the, like Dr. Cheryl LaRoche donated a whole set of books. My old advisor, Doug Armstrong, donated books. And so there's really cool. There's a book that the last time I touched it was in 1991 when I was writing my thesis, and that came in during the first lab program. So the recovery, the community archaeology lab, you all are a huge part of that community. And, it's having this space be one that we're building with you all and sharing with you all, it just makes it so meaningful. And last week was the anniversary for the fire. And to be here in this new space, it made all this complete and so much easier to handle. So thank you all for all the help. But let me see if any other questions. Well, looking forward to keeping up with you all. Definitely sign up. We've got a whole set of lunch and learns that we've got scheduled through June, and then also the May open house. And just so you all know, we changed the opening of the lab from a grand opening to an open house because there are some structural repairs that were needed because of rot on the back of the building that were discovered when we took the old deck off. For those of y'all that are ever adding a deck to your house, do not attach it to the framework. Have it be separately standing, because if it attaches to the house, that's where you get rot. And thank goodness we took that old deck off. It looked like it was in pretty good shape except for the flooring, but behind the outer band where it connected to the wall, all that older wall was rotten. And so this is where, like Carolyn was talking about, finding new ways for building reuse. It's a way to keep the buildings literally alive. Not only are they alive from us using them, but you keep them alive by actually using them and knowing what's going on with them. So thank you all for the help in keeping this space alive. And we're so excited on May 9th to welcome local community members back with memories, and also going to have some of the firefighters that responded to that blaze last year are going to be here as well. We've invited the fire company back. There's at least 30 firefighters that responded to that. And so we're excited to have them back. They might be giving us a surprise gift of one of the items they had when they were on the blaze. So stay tuned for that. So I won't give it away. But yeah, well, thank you all for tuning in today. And I'll send out the recording for those of you all that missed it. And also send you again the papers, because I know there's more people that have registered since I sent that yesterday. But great seeing you all, and can't wait to have you all back here. Even if you're driving by now that we're on Route 20, stop by. We'll make you a coffee. Chris has perfected one of our colleagues up in Delaware gave us an espresso machine. So Chris has taught us all how to make good espressos. So you can have an espresso at Esso. So anyways, we will see you all either on the next Lunch and Learn or in person. And Peggy, you're on the screen. So safe travels this weekend, and we'll see you on Sunday night. And everybody else, we'll see you at some
Thank
point.
you.
So thanks, everybody.
Bye,
Bye.
everyone.
Bill,
Bye.
see you soon.